Without any further ado, I'd like to introduce our director, my new friend and mentor, Dr. Josh Bonde. Yeah.
All right, I think we're good. I'll check with the viewers.
Gotta make sure our online guests are ready to rock and roll.
Yeah.
Thank you all for braving the elements this evening. I'm sure you've all seen in the forecast that it's supposed to get just uglier. So me and Kelly fully thought that we were going to be the only ones in the concourse this evening. So it's a pleasure to see so many faces down here at the museum this evening. How many of you has it been a while since you've been here? A couple of you, all right. So we've decided to move these lectures down here to the concourse because you guys recall the echo up in the higher gallery? Yeah, the acoustics just weren't that great. So we decided it was actually Kelly and Albert's idea to move it down here. So you can thank them if you appreciate this venue. Right, are we good, Kelly?
I believe we are.
All right, so as Kelly said, I'm the director of the Nevada State Museum. I am originally from Fallon, Nevada, which is many of you know about an hour from here. And then I did my undergraduate work at the University of Nevada, Reno. And then I did my master's at Montana State University and then my Ph.D. at the other university in the state. And I got stuck in Southern Nevada for about 15 years. And it's a pleasure to be back up here in Northern Nevada here at the State Museum. So it's a pleasure tonight to talk to you about some of the research I've done. So academically, I'm a vertebrate paleontologist. And over the last 2 decades, we've been trying to figure out where Nevada's story fits within the whole grand scheme of dinosaurs and the age of dinosaurs. So this is just a pretty field picture from Valley Fire State Park, which is going to be featured prominently tonight in a lot of our discoveries. So when people think about dinosaurs in Nevada, it's really not a thought. Usually when we think about dinosaurs, we think of cool places like Montana, Wyoming, and not so cool places like Utah. So the age of dinosaurs, we don't really have a whole lot of rocks of the right type or the right age. In the lower left there, that's a picture outside of Green River, Utah, from the new Utah Raptor State Park. For as far as you can see in that image, are Cretaceous aged rocks that were deposited by ancient rivers on ancient floodplains. And my colleagues over there in Utah, they find dinosaurs across this entire landscape. As a geologist, this is what we call outcrop envy. In Nevada, because our geology is so complicated, which makes for really good gold and silver deposits and really good economic geology, it makes us finding fossils a little bit harder. And so you really have to be a glutton for punishment to go out there and hunt for fossils in what we have here. And I'm not the first person to find dinosaurs in the state of Nevada. There's a 1976 economic geology report done by the United States Geological Survey that was looking for gold and mineral deposits and petroleum deposits around Ely and Eureka. And in the very last paragraph of this otherwise pretty dry monograph, oh, and we found some dinosaur bones. We sent them to Montana to be identified by famous paleontologist Jack Horner, sent them to the Smithsonian, and that was that. And for over 30 years, that was the story of dinosaurs in the state of Nevada. So when I started doing my research on dinosaurs in the state of Nevada, I wanted to see these original bones, these original discoveries. So I reached out to the Smithsonian. They can't find them. So how many of you have seen Indiana Jones? Which the image in the lower left is of. So just like the Ark lost somewhere in the collections of the movie, our very first dinosaur bones are lost somewhere in the collections of the Smithsonian, somewhere in the DC metro area, probably locked away in a box somewhere in the warehouse. So they have not been rediscovered. So where do I fall in the story? So I mentioned I did my undergrad at UNR. I goofed around playing football for a couple of years and was overall not a great undergrad student. But fortunately, I had some really good mentors that kicked me in the butt and said, if you don't get your act straight, you're not going to be able to be successful and finish school and do all that fun stuff. So my last couple of years of undergrad, after I was done getting concussions, got my GPA up, got accepted into grad school to work with this guy, Dave Riccio, at Montana State University. Now, Dave, his dad had retired to Henderson, Nevada, years before, and he reached out to another professor in the Montana State Geology Department and said, I really want to avoid family during the holidays. Where's a good place to go look for fossils? And so the other professor, Jim Schmidt, said, well, there's the right type of rocks, there's the right age of rocks out in Valley of Fire State Park. You should go look out there if you really want to avoid some family. So I get accepted as a grad student of his. He found some turtle shell fossils in his couple of holidays out in southern Nevada. So he said, do you want to work on Cretaceous turtles from Nevada? Being grateful to just have the opportunities, turtles it is. So our very first prospecting trip to Valley of Fire in the winter of 2004. How many of you been to Valley of Fire State Park? Oh, good. So Nevada's oldest and largest state park. Beautiful geologic formations. And as you're driving across the landscape, you drive through lots of these washes that are usually dry. And like, wow, it'd be really cool to see water flowing through those. Well, this winter storm that dumped on us on our very first trip dumped enough water that all of these washes were flash flooding. So what do the two geologists do? Let's go take a closer look. Do everything that they tell you not to do. Fortunately, we weren't a cautionary story about two geologists dead in a flash flood. But what came with this storm is it added just enough moisture to the landscape, enough contrast to the landscape. But when we went out prospecting in our muddy boots, we found not just turtle shell, but the rains have revealed dinosaur teeth, fish scales, crocodile poop, more turtle shell. And this project quickly turned into something much larger than just describing a couple of turtles out in the middle of the desert. So that's where the story, my part of the story starts. So what I want to do now is I want to take you through geologic time in the Mesozoic, which is the age of dinosaurs, and some of the discoveries that our team has made. So another member of our team is in the room too. So my wife, Becky, over here is another paleontologist, and she's the director of the Children's Museum across the street. So a lot of these discoveries we've made together. So this is definitely a team sport. So don't think that I've done all this by myself as I'm going through it, because I certainly have not. So as a geologist, this is the geologic timescale that we have to memorize. It's really obnoxious. And when I used to be a professor at UNLV, I got great pleasure out of making my students memorize it as well. But the section that we're going to be concerned with here is the purple, which is the Triassic, the blue, which is the Jurassic, and the green, which is the Cretaceous. And there are international stratigraphic groups that have officially designated these colors on maps to correspond with these geologic time periods. So, you know, everybody needs a job. That's job security for somebody out there. So we're going to start at the beginning of the Mesozoic. So what are some of our oldest discoveries from the age of dinosaurs from the state of Nevada? So let's go visit the North Muddy Mountains, just outside of Valley of Fire State Park, about 45 minutes to the northwest, or excuse me, northeast of Las Vegas, in rocks that are about 240 million. Are we getting feedback on that? And rocks that are about 240 million years old, a little bit older than dinosaurs are. So where's Nevada during this period of time? We're sitting right on the west coast of not just North America, but we're on the west coast of the supercontinent of Pangaea. Does this work? It does, but it doesn't show up. So this is North America glued onto all of the other continents of the world. And the way I used to teach my students is that Pangaea, the last supercontinent, looked like Pac-Man. And so North America is on the back of Pac-Man's head, and we're right on the back side of it. So we're right on the coast. And these are what the rocks look like. So in the upper left with the Raptor scale, you can see these ripples in the rocks, ripples in the mud and the sand. In the lower left is a modern tidal flat. So that's how we can tell that these ancient environments, how we interpret them. So 240 million years ago, southern Nevada was right on the tides. So tides in, tides out. And you can preserve, I'm making things around, preserve each one, every time the moon does a lap around the sun, is preserved in the rocks, which is kind of a cool way to perceive a place through time. And this is actually Becky's the lead on this research project. But what she found and what we've been researching subsequently, these are the oldest fingerprints in the history of Nevada. So if you look here, these are 240 million year old fingers that pressed into the mud, got buried fast enough, squished quick enough, and preserved for 250 million years. That's kind of impressive, right? If you look at this one in particular, I don't know how well the contrast shows where you're at. You can see the individual scales going down the finger of a little animal that is a cousin of the ancestors of dinosaurs called dinosauromorphs. So these little things, I'll sit back to Mike. These little things were scurrying out across the tidal flats at low tide to go grab whatever fish or other animals were stranded as the tide went out, and then presumably trying to get back into shore before they got flooded out as well. I really like this one too. Like, I think Becky, you found this one, right? This little handprint in the mud with a penny for scale. So 240 million years ago, we're sitting right on the coast of Pangaea, the west coast of Pangaea, the west coast of what becomes North America. So let's fast forward the clock a little bit to about 230 million years ago. So we're jumping ahead about 10 million years in time. And we're going to be visiting Spring Mountain Ranch State Park, which is about 20 miles west of Las Vegas in the Red Rock Canyon area. We're still in the Triassic. So what's going on in Nevada during this period of time? You all know Nevada state fossil, right? The ichthyosaur, right? So, but ichthyosaurs are not dinosaurs. So this will be the last slide you see of anything swimming around the ocean. Because the next time somebody comes to you and says, well, isn't our ichthyosaur a dinosaur? No, it is not a dinosaur. Is it a reptile? It is a reptile. Did it live during the age of dinosaurs? It did live during the age of dinosaurs. Is it a dinosaur? It is not a dinosaur. It's what we call a marine reptile. So this is a different group of animals that went back into the oceans. Best we can tell, dinosaurs never went back to the sea. Since dinosaurs eventually gave rise to birds. So where our state fossil, the shonosaurs, are swimming around these shallow seaways of central Nevada. In southern Nevada, again, we're still on the coast. Kind of these swampy, maybe think of New Orleans or the Everglades type of environments. So in southern Nevada, we're talking about, since this is before dinosaurs really take off across the globe, it's actually the world of crocodiles. So there's these weird crocodile-like animals like you see in the lower left. They're not true crocodiles, but they're giant and they fill the same ecological niche as crocodiles. There's crocodiles during this period of time that look like giant pigs with horns sticking off their shoulders called dinosaurs. And real crocodiles, the group that gives rise to true crocodiles, if crocodiles weren't scary enough, crocodiles during this period of time ran on two legs, had faces like pit bulls, and could chase you through the forest. Have a nice evening tonight. Fortunately, it's cold enough here, we don't need to worry about crocodiles chasing us down. But during this period of time, dinosaurs are relatively low-statured animals, and they're just beginning their spread across the globe. But unfortunately, we haven't found any of those yet. But what we have found here in the Triassic rocks of southern Nevada, so this is the section, if you're sitting down at the Spring Mountain Ranch, and you're looking up at the cliffs, you're looking at Mesozoic or age of dinosaur age rocks. So if you ever find yourself at Red Rock Canyon or at Spring Mountain Ranch State Park, you're looking at Nevada's dinosaur rock history. So in 2015, yeah.
Sorry, you mentioned dinosaurs never went back to the sea. Does that mean there are no oceanic dinosaurs?
Correct, yeah. So in 2015, avid hiker and a member of the Southern Nevada Rock Art Preservation Community, Harold Larson in the upper left, was hiking with some friends out at Spring Mountain Ranch. And he came across this rock that you see in his hand there in the upper left. So he showed it to a couple of geologists and they weren't convinced. He showed it to the paleontologists at UNLV other than myself. And he said it was probably a pot, Native American pot. And then he showed it to me and I was like, all right, Harold, I'll go take a look. And so we went out into the ranch and sure enough, we found not just one, but we found about 6 of these backbones all in a row. So that's one backbone he's holding in his hand. To what we call a metoposaur, which is in the lower right, these are giant Cretaceous amphibians. So these are actually holdovers from an older world from the Paleozoic. So they haven't quite gone extinct yet. But this is like a giant salamander like you. So these things are 10 feet long. Great big flat heads, big sharp teeth. And this is actually the westernmost occurrence of them. And we're actually presenting this research at the upcoming Geological Society meeting coming up here in March in Reno, because this is brand new stuff. Like nobody's heard of these things being this big or this far west. So that's kind of the exciting part of that. And Harold, he was head over heels when he found out this was a brand new thing. The Las Vegas newspaper picked it up, and he got to be on the front page of the newspaper. And I think he said he bought up 2 grocery stores worth of newspapers, and mailed them to his grandkids. And so to this day, I still get random phone calls from Harold asking about his dinosaur bones. They're not dinosaurs, but yeah. So this is if you're out in Lake Mead National Recreation Area, there's a really nice transition of just across the pretty landscapes back where most people don't go hiking. In the foreground, or closest to us, those are Triassic rocks, and we're looking up at the next geologic time period of the age of dinosaurs, the Jurassic. So during the Jurassic, where's Nevada? We're still on the west coast of what Pangea is now beginning to break apart into its current configuration of continents. But the west coast of North America becomes an enormous desert, one of the largest deserts in the history of our planet that we have a geologic record of. And so if you ever go out to Zion National Park, Valley Fire State Park, Red Rock Canyon, you see those brilliant orange sandstones. Those are fossilized sand dunes from this ancient sand sea, which was similar to the modern Sahara Desert, especially in scope and size. But just like today, where there's life between the dunes, 180 million years ago during the Jurassic, life existed between the dunes in Nevada. So here we are looking at about 180 million years ago, and we're going to be looking at rocks in Valley Fire State Park to the east and in Red Rock Canyon to the west. So in the upper left, that's a dinosaur track that was discovered in Red Rock Canyon. And it got everybody this also made the news down there, and everyone got kind of excited about it. In the upper right and the lower left, this is the same slab. And you can vaguely make out kind of 3 toes here. 3 toes, 3 toes. So these are little meat-eating dinosaurs related to the dinosaur growler, which is the state dinosaur of New Mexico. So a little primitive meat-eating dinosaur. And if you look in the image here, which was done by our friend Brian Eng, who's a paleo artist, it would have been like these little things running off across the sand dunes. Try not to be eaten by bigger meat-eating dinosaurs. Now the tracks in the upper right and the lower left, which were found right next to each other in Valley of Fire, it's kind of a cool story. So I used to teach geology field camps. So that's the last class you have to take to become a geologist at either University of Nevada, Reno or UNLV. So I had the students out there and they're mapping rocks during the day. We'd come back to our camp, the group campground at Valley of Fire. And a couple of campgrounds down was a Boys and Girls Club. And this group it's not so much a problem I've noticed up here in Northern Nevada, but in Southern Nevada, about the statistic I read was that 80% of kids don't leave their neighborhood. So most of their childhood is on asphalt in the neighborhood that they grow up in. So this group was bringing these inner city kids out for their very first camp trip. And so I guess the kids were playing around the rocks of the campground, just like kids do when we go camping. And they found something. And they saw our UNLV trucks at the next campground over, and they came walking over. Does there happen to be a paleontologist here? Which is kind of a random ask of an adjacent campsite. So, yes, there is. How can I help you? He said, we think we found some dinosaur tracks. So I stashed my adult beverage behind the tent, and I went walking over with these kids to see what they had found. And sure enough, they had found a brand new dinosaur track site. Brand new to science. Can you imagine on your very first camp trip, your very first time ever sleeping in a tent under the stars in the Mojave Desert, you find a brand new sign of life 180 million years old. Cool story, right? So I brought it to the attention of the park superintendent, said, this is just a cool story. We should do a press release and like, you know, give these kids some credit. This guy was getting towards the end of his career, and his response was, how many yards of dirt would it take to bury something like that? He did not want to deal with it. But he was a great guy, and he's been a great collaborator through the years. He's just a little grouchy sometimes. But with the new park interpretive rangers and everything out in the Valley of Fire, they do want to tell these stories. Some other cool finds. This is a trackway from a tarantula. So you think of how delicate a tarantula's got to step on sand to make an impression, got preserved. This is a rock hammer for scale. So just think of a big ball peen hammer if you've never held a rock hammer before. And all these little parallel dimples is the tracks of about 12 little beagle-sized mammal-like reptiles that were running up a sand dune, probably running away from something like this. So it's the first evidence of a herd, apparently, in the fossil record as well. So just like today, life between the dunes. Here's a brown hyena in the sand dunes of Namibia. And imagine, you know, in 180 million years from now, maybe somebody will be interpreting this poor thing's tracks. All right, so one thing I always get asked is, where's the famous dinosaurs? And a lot of the famous dinosaurs are of Jurassic age, and they come from places like Utah and Wyoming. You think of things like Allosaurus, Brontosaurus, Stegosaurus. These are all really famous dinosaurs that have been found from the Western United States, all about 160 million years old. Why haven't we found these in Nevada? We don't have a single trace of these dinosaurs. Well, as it turns out, our geology is to blame. So during this period of time, there's some mountain building events across the western edge of North America, shoving Jurassic age rocks into the air, and subsequent to this as well, there's more mountain building events. And what happens when you shove rocks up in the air? They weather away. Just think of the snow and the ice breaking them down, chemical weathering, physical weathering, breaking down these rocks and washing them out into places like Utah. So when you see cool dinosaurs, cool famous dinosaurs like Allosaurus, Brontosaurus, Brachiosaurus in museums that were dug up in Utah and Wyoming, and preserved scenes like this, pack of Allosaurus hunting a baby Brachiosaurus across the plains of Utah and Colorado, that's buried in Nevada dirt. So they would be able to have their cool dinosaurs if it wasn't for our rocks having weathered and buried them 100 miles away. So we will take credit for that. All right, so this brings us then to the last period of the age of dinosaurs, the Cretaceous time period. So the supercontinent of Pangaea has now broken apart. North America is divided by two during the last period of time at the highest sea level in recent geologic history. So the Arctic Ocean was connected to the Gulf of Mexico, and North America divided in two. So here we are at the end of the age of dinosaurs, or at least nearing it. And so we're going to look at rocks that are about 115 million years old around Eureka. So these are the rocks where those first discoveries in 1976 were made. So around Eureka and going up towards Carlin, here's Becky here digging some fossils, me and Becky digging up some fossils. For scale on some of these outcrops, about halfway between Eureka and Carlin, that's me standing on the outcrop right there. So
Eureka, California?
Eureka, Nevada,
Oh,
the better Eureka. And so we've been hunting out here for almost 10 years now. In the upper left are some crocodile backbones and skin bones that we've discovered. Digging up a new site there in the middle. In the upper right, this is an area that gets socked almost daily by afternoon thunderstorms in July and August. So what do you do when the storms roll in Nevada? You just wait them out for about 10-15 minutes in the tent with snacks and other fun stuff. And that's kind of a fun story is that we've been doing work out there for about 8 years at this point, and we're getting ready to head into town, go do laundry and get some showers and stuff like that. We come over a rise out of camp, and there's a herd of llamas staring at us. Now, llamas haven't been native in Nevada since the last ice age. And in all the years we've been doing work out there, we've never seen a llama, but all of a sudden here's a herd of llamas. And llamas being relatives of camels, they're not nice animals. They just kind of grouchily stare at us as we drive by them, all staring at each other. And we got chatting with a shepherd in town at the grocery store. And I guess the story of the llamas is, one of the local ranchers in this valley thought it would be a good idea to raise them for their wool. Turns out they weren't making a whole, what's going on there? Turns out they weren't making a whole lot of money on it. And the gate got left open in the middle of the night. The llamas disappeared, an insurance claim was filed. So if you're ever hiking or hunting or doing anything out in central Nevada, beware of the wild llamas. But some of our fossil discoveries. In the upper left, we have some fossilized pond scum called stromatolites. In the upper right, we have, you've seen the back of a crocodile when it's all bumpy. That's because their skin is full of bones called osteoderms. And so that's what's in the upper middle is those skin bones from that chainmail that's on their backs. In the upper right is a great big crocodile tooth. And then in the lower left is the impression of a pine cone. In the upper left, that's a armored dinosaur called an ankylosaur tooth. In the lower left, that's an iguanodon, lower right's a turtle. So this is a project we're still actively working on, hoping to get back out to, hopefully this summer. You know, as with everything else, COVID screwed up everything, so we haven't really been out there in a couple of years, and it'd be nice to get back out and get dirty. And so me and Becky decided, we've been together for a couple of years and decided to go just elope and tie the knot in Eureka. So we got married at the Eureka County Courthouse. And so what do two paleontologists do after they get married? You go hunt for dinosaurs. And so the day after our wedding, we went out hunting, and sure enough, we found a brand new site. So this, in the middle, well, on the far left is how it was found. In the middle is these paired bones that are now the longest dinosaur bones that have been found in the ground in Nevada. They were paired, there's more in the ground. And when you get a permit from the Bureau of Land Management, you can dig up to a square meter before you have to ask for a bigger permit. The bigger permit has to go through the same permitting process as an open pit mine. So it's taking a little bit of time to get that cleared, but we're being patient and hopeful we'll be able to get back to the site this year. But this is probably going to be Nevada's biggest dinosaur. Yeah.
I don't know if it's gonna come to it or not, but several years back, I heard that they found bones down in the Genoa area, but they wouldn't say where because they didn't want people raiding the area. But I never heard any more about it.
I haven't heard anything about that, but if you find the clipping for it, let me know and I'll pursue it. But so these dinosaur bones are still going into the ground. The permits are pending, hopefully clearing soon. So this summer we'll be getting back out there and digging this thing up. And not too far from this site, the reason we're looking near the site is that not more than 50 yards away is another enormous dinosaur we've been digging on for about the last 6 years. So we have two big dinosaurs that are going to come out of the ground in the hills outside of Eureka in the near future.
Have you been able to identify them or?
Not yet. The last one, it's probably a sauropod. That's the only type of dinosaur I can think of that has bones this big. Sauropods are the long neck, long tailed dinosaurs. So that's my guess. And right now it's just a guess because we only have a couple bones. The other one that we're digging up, it's pretty chunky, pretty clunky bones. I would not be surprised if it was an armored dinosaur, but we just don't know yet. All right, so down to the Valley Fire, just some of the discoveries that came from my master's project and research that is ongoing. These are some fossilized, these are some ferns that were preserved in volcanic ash deposits. We get magnolia leaves. So Southern Nevada is not a place where magnolias grow wild today, obviously. So a completely different world just 100 million years ago. You can buy these things, these horsetails at the nursery today. You find them all over in these deposits as well. You have to forgive my photography skills, but the fuzzy image in the middle, those are gar scales, garfish scales. So if any of you go fishing, have ever caught a garfish, kind of a primitive looking fish, each one of those little scales is made out of a substance similar to enamel on your teeth. And we also find coprolites, which are fossilized poop with these little scales in them. So I imagine that wasn't too much fun to pass, but somebody was hungry enough to eat these things. And then in the lower right, that's a lungfish tooth. So lungfish also were swimming around the rivers of southern Nevada 100 million years ago. Those weird little flat, rich teeth are specialized teeth for crunching clams and snails and things like that. And then we have turtles. I grew up with turtles. I still have my box turtles, and from when I was a kid. Modern turtles are actually kind of boring. We get ripped off by modern turtles. Ancient turtles had really fancy ornamentations on their shells. So we can actually tell a species of turtle based on just a chunk of shell. Modern turtles, most of their shells are pretty flat, pretty lame. I love them, but in the past, their ancestors are a lot more flashy. Crocodiles, so again, that's another one of those skin bones in the middle, a bunch of teeth on the right. And a scene like this could have played out in southern Nevada 100 million years ago, and likely did play out 100 million years ago. And how do we know? I just showed you the crocodiles. So crocodiles were cruising these rivers of southern Nevada. And this poor duck-billed dinosaur, we found evidence of them too. So they were living along the banks of these rivers alongside these giant crocodiles. And duck-billed dinosaurs have been found in other places with crocodile bite marks out of their sides. So these things, think of a wildebeest trying to cross a river in Africa. You see the hungry crocodiles just waiting, right? Crocodiles have always done that. It's just been different things they've been chomping on. So in the lower left is a string of backbones that Becky's been very patiently teasing out of the sandstone. If you make out the individual little white lines on that rock, that's a single pass of something not too dissimilar from a dentist drill. So she's removing the sandstone grain by grain. So that's why she tackled this project, because she's far more patient than I am. I'll tell you the dinosaur I just named because it came out of the dust and I was able to just have to glue it together like an idiot. Now, the dinosaur that Becky's working on, this big duck-billed dinosaur, has been found in these big lumps of sandstone out in the backcountry of Valley of Fire. And so teaching those field classes, I had a group of younger backs than my own out in the middle of nowhere for a summer. So we decided to build a stretcher out of a tarp and 2 shovels. And we lugged this thing in the middle of summer, about 10, 15 feet at a time. We'd have to rotate on the shovels, go another 10, 15 feet for over 1.5 miles down the sandy wash to get these bones out of the ground. So it was a pretty good workout that day. And one of our big supporters in Southern Nevada is Love Lady Brewery. And so to support our old nonprofit that we used to run, they did a run. It was supposed to just be a one-off keg. We called her Paleo Porter. It's got a duck-billed dinosaur skeleton on the front of it. It's supposed to be a fundraiser for us. Well, it ends up being one of their top sellers. So now it's a permanent one on the rotating handles. So if you're in Henderson and go by Love Lady Brewery, you can get a Paleo Porter. It is a coffee, chocolate, peanut butter stout, or porter, excuse me. And it pairs quite nicely with dessert. Some other discoveries from Valley of Fire. We get the teeth of sauropod dinosaurs. So these long neck, long tailed dinosaurs. The largest animals that ever walked the planet had these really simple pencil-like teeth. So how do they feed themselves? These things, these animals that were over 100 tons. They had gizzards. And so some of them have actually been found with intact gizzard stones in their body cavities. So the teeth were just for plucking vegetation. Simple tooth in the lower right is like an armored dinosaur. So along the banks of some river 100 million years ago, we could have armored dinosaurs and long neck dinosaurs. This is a period of time where allosaurs had not completely gone extinct, are still a large dominant meat-eating dinosaur. So that's a large allosaur animal called Ciex, which was found in southern Utah and rocks of similar age. So we find bones of this thing in Valley of Fire as well. The lower right, that's a tooth from an ancestor of a tyrannosaur. So with allosaurs still on the scene, not having gone extinct yet, tyrannosaurs haven't become big, scary tyrannosaurs yet. They're little raptor-like dinosaurs. And of course, we find the raptors too. So this is a thigh bone to an animal called Deinonychus, which is, people like to say, the true inspiration for the velociraptors from the Jurassic Park franchise. Real velociraptors come from Mongolia and are no bigger than a turkey. But it's a cooler name, so that's why Michael Crichton used it in his novels. And then, of course, Nevadadromeus, which is the dinosaur that our team just named. So the first dinosaur new to science from the state of Nevada. So Nevadadromeus means the Nevada runner. And then schmitti is after Professor Jim Schmidt there in the lower right, who 20 years ago told Dave Riccio how to go avoid his family during the holidays. So because he pointed us in the right direction, he got the honor of getting the name recognition. So what makes Nevadadromeus unique? Becky has this thing on display over at the Children's Museum if you're interested, but she was kind enough to bring it over across the street this evening. So this is the thigh bone. So it's not a big dinosaur. You know, think of turkey dinner. This thing's probably not much bigger than your turkey for Thanksgiving, but this weird little knob on the front of it, and I'd welcome you all to come down and check it out after I'm done blabbing at you, is a feature not seen on this group of dinosaurs until 20 years after the Valley Fire rocks were deposited. So it pushes the age of this group of dinosaurs back. These little plant-eating dinosaurs called thescelosaurs. So they would have had a little beak in the front of their mouth, little simple teeth in their cheeks, and they were built to run. So these animals, the kids always asked me when we had our nonprofit in Henderson, was it a big scary dinosaur? I just showed you a slide bone. It was not big. It was not scary, but it fed the big scary dinosaurs. That's the Nevada runner. It was running away from everything else because it was on the menu for everything else.
What would be the purpose of that little projection from the top of the femur?
It's a muscle attachment for a muscle that's going across the quadricep back towards the tail. So an adaptation actually for running. And the search in Valley of Fire continues. So this is actually the time of year where we should be in Valley of Fire State Park hunting. You definitely don't want to be out there come June or July. I could do it when I was younger, but not so much anymore. So when we found Nevadadromeus, it was actually during a summer thunderstorm where we were teaching a paleontology field camp for these Montana State students. So we bring these poor Montana kids down to Southern Nevada in the middle of June and July. Trial by fire. All right, and then our last story from the age of dinosaurs here in Nevada. So this one takes us over to White Pine County, just outside of Lund. And so we are in rocks now, which span the end of the age of dinosaurs and begin the age of mammals or the Cenozoic, a period also called the Cretaceous Paleogene boundary. Now, most famous because it's marked by a big meteor impact in Mexico, right? Everybody knows about the meteor impact in Mexico that kills the dinosaurs. The rocks up in the hills in the Egan Range above Lund preserve in section that event. So we have rocks that span this geologic time period. And from these rocks, we find frogs. This is Nevada's, yeah.
So do these rocks have iridium deposits?
We haven't done the geochemistry on it yet, but based on other dating techniques, we know the section is that the anomaly will be in there. Another team from the University of New Mexico is actually going to be working on that soon. Yeah.
So those rocks that you can link to that meteor are composed of sediment that sprayed out when the meteor impacted?
No, we don't have any of the spherules. We don't have any of the ejecta. But what we have is this is a high elevation lake during this period of time. So Nevada during this period of time would have been more similar to the Altiplano of South America. So about 9,000 feet elevation, 8,000 foot elevation, big freshwater alkaline lakes sitting on top of this plateau and hopping around in these lakes. And we're the only vertebrates that we find in there are frogs. We find the frogs in the Cretaceous rocks. We find the frogs in the Paleogene rocks. This is the first known survivor of that event. His name is, or her name is Eorabetta nevadensis. So I didn't name it. This frog was actually first discovered in an oil drill core in Railroad Valley. Now, for those of you who are not geologists, how big around do you think a drill core is for oil exploration?
About 3 inches.
It's about yay big around. And in that drill core, they found 3 frogs.
What?
That's how many frogs were in this lake. And so it took another 50 years before we found them in outcrop. But once we started finding them, they were everywhere. So in the upper left, you can see the first frog that was discovered. It just kind of looks like a tectonic roadkill. Everyone's seen a frog run over in the road, so it just kind of. But it wasn't the only one, we found hundreds of them. In the lower right, that's one that's kind of a little disarticulated. This work was done, this work was done with, if you've ever been to Sierra College down in Rockland, their professor, Dick Hilton, one of my mentors as an undergrad, we would go up there every summer and collect frogs out of these rocks. So it's cool. I think it's a cool story that we have the first survivor, first document, obviously there were other survivors, but first documented survivor of that extinction event, these little frogs hopping across the geologic boundaries. I know that was cheesy. And part of the fun working up the Egan Range, of course, you probably can't tell from where you're at, are the rattlesnakes. The rattlesnakes love it up there for some reason. So that's the story of the age of dinosaurs in Nevada thus far. Like I said, this is a team sport. And so we couldn't do this work without permission from state parks, BLM. All of our work is done under permit. Research facilities and support, and of course the team down there on the bottom. So thank you all for listening to me blab at you about dinosaurs and other critters tonight, and I'm happy to entertain any questions until Kelly and Albert throw us out.
Where your wife is finding the bones and you haven't been able to be back, is there something protecting that or preserving it?
So the question is, how are we protecting the fossils when we're not out there in the field with them? Number one, it's distance. So we're out in the middle of nowhere most of the time. So these aren't on beaten paths. Our closest site to a road is probably about 1.5 miles to a road. And the number one way that we protect the fossils is through ignorance. So a lot of times people will walk right across these things and it's just a rock. For sites that we're actually digging on and have exposed bones, we'll put a tarp down on top of what we've exposed and then we'll backfill it. So it's just a matter of ignorance and distance and then sometimes camouflage. Any other questions? I answered all of your questions about the age of dinosaurs.
Free the last.
Has there ever been an observable evidence of a animal that was contemporary with humans that evolved into a different species?
An animal contemporary with humans that evolved into another species?
Yes.
It's been done with domestic fish. It's been done with barnacles. But most instances where new species have co-occurred with people comes from invertebrates and single-celled organisms.
Thank you.
When did the marshy swampland disappear and it turned into Nevada?
No, that's a great question. So why did we dry out?
Yeah.
The reason we dried out is because of geology, because of the mountain building events. So as a big oceanic plate about the size of the Pacific plate began to dive under the west coast of North America, it's just like a car crash. So as the fenders get crumpled up, shoves the rocks and the mountains up into the air, it blocks all of those moist air masses coming off the ocean, and then next thing you know, you have a rain shadow and we're in the Mojave and the Great Basin.
So when did that start to happen?
So we dried out to our current state about, there's debate, but somewhere between 5 and 10 million years ago. Before 10 million years ago, it was oak and sequoia woodlands across Nevada and four tusked elephants and giant bear dogs. A story for another night.
Yeah, Josh, thanks for the great presentation. The two dinosaurs that you're excavating out in Eureka right now that you don't know what the species is yet, is there a chance they could eventually, once you've excavated them, be shown here at the Nevada State Museum? And how's that decided where an intact dinosaur gets to be shown? Who has ownership of it?
Thank you for that question, Rich. So the question is, where do the dinosaurs get to be shown after they're dug up, and how does that get determined? So when we put in our excavation permits with, in this case, the Bureau of Land Management, you have to have an agreement with the museum already in place where those fossils are going to go. And so we happen to know a museum. So those fossils, as part of our agreement, those fossils will be coming here to the Nevada State Museum. So there's a long legacy in Nevada of fossils and our cultural history being exported. Places like California or New York or Ohio, Chicago. And not that those museums are bad or that our fossils or our cultural heritage being treated poorly, but it would be really nice if our kids could come to Carson City and learn about dinosaurs that live here in Nevada, right? So that's one thing that me and Becky really pride ourselves on, is that our cultural history and our natural history will stay home for Nevada kids to learn about here in Nevada. And if those California kids want to come over and learn about it, that's fantastic as well.
You could say like the state park specimens go over that.
Yeah, so that's for the Bureau of Land Management specimens. Yeah, Nevada Division of State Park fossils like Valley of Fire, Spring Mountain Ranch. Those are going to go back to the parks that they were excavated from, so that they can be interpreted in the visitor centers at those parks.
So have we found like mammoth fossils and stuff in the mountain?
Yeah, so mammoth fossils from the last ice age have been found in almost, at least pieces of them have been found in almost every county in the state. So mammoths really love Nevada. There's only one part of the state that mammoths didn't care for, and that was Elko. And that's because those dirty mastodons were there.
How far back is DNA preserved? Because you actually find bone.
Yes.
Right? Is there DNA to be found in them?
Of all the biomolecules, lipids, proteins, and DNA is the most fragile, but the technologies for extracting it are getting better and better. So until about 5 years ago, the oldest DNA that had ever been recovered came from a sloth in southern Nevada. So they found DNA from a mummified piece of sloth, giant ground sloth. But now they're finding DNA that's going back to nearly 1 million years old. And they're finding it really deep in the pulp cavities of the molars of some of these animals. It's a hard question to answer, only because things I didn't think were possible when I was an undergrad or grad student, people are figuring out how to do it. So there's a project me and Becky are working on that's not dinosaur related, but from rocks that are 16 million years old, we have fossilized maggots. Now that doesn't sound very appetizing, especially around dinner time, right? But think about a maggot. Right before dinner, think about a maggot. They're squishy, they're soft, there's really nothing hard about them, but we found them perfectly fossilized, turned to corpse. And so now we're trying to, the next paper we're writing is trying to figure it out, how something that small, that delicate can get turned to rock. So there's all sorts of different scenarios, geologic scenarios around the world. So I'm not going to tell you we're never going to get dinosaur DNA, but somebody might. Somebody might figure it out, the right geological circumstances might exist somewhere in the world.
So do we have any idea how old the fossilized maggots are?
16 million years old.
Oh.
Oh yeah, they're found in the skull and the sinus cavities of a four-tusked elephant animal.
Wow.
Okay, so can you confirm that I heard that they are actually trying to breed some type of woolly mammoth that the remains they found in Russia and inside current elephants, and to repopulate the tundra, Siberian tundra?
There's a international group of Japanese and Dutch geneticists who are trying to take DNA preserved in tundra specimens. So they've been frozen for about, tens of thousands of years. They're trying to extract either DNA or reproductive material if it's a male, and clone them in Asian elephants, because are using the Asian elephant as a host, because Asian elephants are actually the closest living relatives or closest living cousins of mammoths. So There was a big Discovery Channel special a couple of years, probably about 10 years ago now, where they found an intact mammoth in the tundra and they cut it out and they sucked the fake tusk on the front of it as they flew it out in a helicopter across the tundra. Well, when they thawed that thing out, it turns out that was not the first time it thawed out. It was actually kind of mammoth soup when it started thawing out. So they didn't quite get what they want, but with modern genetic techniques, it's not to say they won't be able to do that at some point. The only issue is when it comes to international genetic laws, you can't let a genetically modified vertebrate come to full term. So I don't know how they'll get around that.
Question from one of the Zoomers wanted to know when the mountain crash occurred, did it happen several times to create all the mountains in Nevada?
No, so there was a series of about 5 moderate-sized mountain building events throughout the age of dinosaurs, so through the Triassic and the Jurassic, which culminated in one great big one called the severe mountain building event during the Cretaceous time period. So it was a sequence of mountain building events. That's why our rocks are really banged up. Anything else? Yeah.
Could you say a little more about the laws that pertain to not letting GMO vertebrates live a certain amount of time?
I am not an expert on it, so I'm sorry.
Okay. All right, thanks anyway.
Yeah.
So you're mentioning all these like new discoveries that are happening, yeah. And like, why are we like discovering these new dinosaurs just now? Like with the other states, it's always been like common knowledge that they're there. Like with Montana, these things have been coming out since the 1800s.
Right.
So yeah, why are we now just discovering new species of that?
That's a good question. So the question is, why are we just now finding dinosaurs when they've been known across all the Western United States since 1800s? The rocks are hard. I don't mean that facetiously. There's not much of it. It's been completely jumbled up. There's only slivers of it. And as I kind of alluded to earlier, a lot of these early expeditions are coming from the east to the west, or from California out across the Intermountain West. So if you're going to spend the resources to do that, you want to go where the low-hanging fruit. So if you go to places like eastern Montana, where I did work as a grad student, you're literally tripping over Triceratops bones. They're everywhere. So if you want a Triceratops for your museum, you don't come to Nevada. So these expeditions focus heavily on places where there's lots and lots of that outcrop, like I was talking about the outcrop envy earlier.
Okay.
So there's only a couple tiny slivers of rock in Nevada. So people just never really dedicated a lot of efforts towards it.
Okay.
In the back. These expeditions are funded by my Wells Fargo credit card, and you can take it up with my wife afterwards.
I just want to make a statement, anybody can take it the way they want to, but it doesn't help with some people's stupidity when they cement in the footprints at the Nevada State Prison. There was dinosaur prints there, and
So the trackways at the state prison, they were covered up. Those are ice age animals, so like mammoths and giant ground sloth tracks and dire wolves and saber-toothed cats. All the tracks have been preserved on the ancient lake bed. And the prisoners, when they're quarrying for walls around the prison and buildings like the Mint over here, encountered these tracks. And so they were found in the 1800s. And they were found at just the right period of time that even Mark Twain did a nice sarcastic quip about their discovery being the tracks of the first drunken legislature letting out. So it's kind of timely for we're in a legislative session. But the most recent superintendent of the state prison wasn't amused by them. But our Dr. Gina Torrey here, who's our curator of anthropology, was on scene. And before they were concreted over, cemented over, he was able to convince them to put down a layer of clay sand, a tarp, before they put the concrete down. So in the hopes that if thoughts ever changed on site, that the concrete could be removed without damaging the tracks.
oh, cool. I didn't know that. So that means now that the society, the prison society, that are the ones that are doing the tours, if they were made knowledge of that, then they may be able to undo the tracks if they decide to do so.
That was the hope when the sand and the tarps were put down.
Thank you.
That's it. I guess I'll let you guys go. Nevadadromeus is up here at the front. If you're too shy to ask any questions from the crowd, we'll be hanging around for a few more minutes. Go ahead and check out the dinosaurs, and thank you for being here this evening.